Do you know also that's interesting about processed food as well is that you can have a homemade burger. Let's say you get beef mince, right? So beef mince is already processed. Let's just say it is literally just beef mince. You've churned up some steak into beef mince. There's nothing added to it. It is technically processed. So people get this idea that processed foods is bad when actually it is just being processed from what it was before. And that's not a bad thing. Your body processes it. You eat a steak, your body processes it and digests it and absorbs it. The problem with ultra processed foods is what people mostly refer to it as is that it's not just ground down from steak into beef mince. They then add preservatives into it to make it last longer. They add flavor enhancers. They add e-colors, for example, to make it look a certain way. Because I don't know if you've ever seen a chicken breast when it hasn't had the e-color in it, but it looks awful.
Welcome back to the Perform Well podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're looking for performance and wellness optimization so that you can not only smash your career, but also have a better life, better relationships, and better health. We believe that performance and wellness are yin and yang and work together. So listen in as we dive into topics that are going to help you optimize your life for the better. Welcome back, guys. And I'm sure if you're watching this, listening to this, that you have been told the news. Donald Trump has been re-elected for the 47th president for the United States. Yep. And RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., related to the late John F. Kennedy. He has potentially landed himself a job in the American government as someone that wants to make America healthy again, is what his slogan is. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Is ultra-processed food the reason why autism rates are on the rise, while there's a lot of people that are becoming obese every year, and it's increasing every year? Are children struggling with weight gain and health issues because of these foods? We're going to talk about it today. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's going to be very much a debating topic here. So please, if you want to have your own 5 cents worth, please just drop it in the comments below, because we'd love to hear your guys' input. And, let's have a healthy debate on this topic too, because I think it's it's a common ground for people to have their own bases on is, the health of food. We've seen a lot of people in the last year or two start talking about the demonization of food, but actually, do they have some grounds to talk about? And is there some truth behind this where we should be more in tune and actually taking things to more governmental level to have these implementations to change the way we're eating as well? Like, Nick, let's talk on kind of a basic level for the people listening and watching at this point in time. How often do you hear and see people consuming ultra-processed food?
I mean, I think ultra-processed foods is widely eaten across pretty much every population, including myself. I think we can both agree, Dan, based on what I've seen you eat, mate, and what you've seen me eat, that we both eat ultra high processed food from time to time. And when I say time to time, I mean potentially every day in most cases. Why is that the case? Because I believe accessibility and affordability is the reason why people are going for those kind of foods. And obviously they're highly satiating most of the time. But I guess really what we're trying to discuss today is it good and important for your health to have a limit on the amount of ultra processed foods you have? And as you said, Dan, we want a healthy debate, no pun intended. We are experts when it comes to body transformation, but to be an expert of health is a very hard thing to be nowadays, because no one really knows what the healthiest option is for you. There are some people that know a little bit more about it, some people know a little bit less. But if you go from, the Inuits, up north near the North Pole, say North Pole, their diet varies wildly from other populations that are plant-based eaters, for example, and their diet makes them extremely healthy. So it's hard to say one food is better than the other, one diet's better than the other. But the topic is ultra-processed foods.
Yeah, so interesting point you raised there is obviously there are a lot of experts in this field, and I was listening to a podcast with Dr. William Lee on it, who is a blood vessel specialist, and he goes into detail about like the good foods for blood vessels and how it's going to improve it. This is where we're talking about like ultra processed foods. The reason they are very much demonized is they have more of an effect, a negative effect on the body, like a much more negative effect on the body. And there isn't really like a counterbalance between this, because then we need to make sure we're getting our whole foods to counterbalance this. But because of, as Nick said there, the accessibility of these foods means a lot of us are consuming them. And yes, they are detrimental to our health, and we need to look at them and start thinking, okay, well, what long-term ways can we find to improve this? Now, obviously, it's linked to a lot of different diseases. I think when we're going into the topic of what the effect of ultra processed foods has on us, it's going to increase your risk of atherosclerosis, which is clotting of the arteries, which then leads to increased heart disease. There are higher risks of cancers. There's higher risk of diabetes. There's higher risk of all sorts of other different problems that come and stem from overconsumption of ultra processed foods. Yes, we can talk about it leading into the calorie line. PTs like us, we love it. We love a calorie, but at the same time, we can lead into that. Now, as kind of a starting point, you said about accessibility. I still think there's an essence of choice with people. And if I'm brutally honest, I think we've become slightly more lazy choosers. And I will say that with a pinch of salt, because there is a lot of people who could have the decision between a Greggs sausage roll and then going home and making, a really simple sandwich. And a lot of people will go for that Greggs sausage roll because it's the easy option. It's a lazy choice, in my opinion.
At the end of the day, education's always been the thing that if you improve education and it's good education, you teach people the right things to eat and how to do, etc. That's the best way of getting it across, right? But unfortunately, if we're looking at a lot of people that, let's say, the majority of people that are struggling paycheck to paycheck to survive nowadays, when it comes to they're stressed about everything going on and they look at healthy food options, they always seem to be slightly higher priced than the convenience foods. They're probably most likely going to go for that, right? And you could educate them and say, well, that's not good for you, but it doesn't really help them in that situation because they need accessibility and convenience, in accordance to what they're struggling with in terms of time and energy demands, etc. It's easy to say that obviously processed foods are bad for you, and it's easy to say that it's your choice and that's the reason why you're doing it. But there needs to be some level of change at a fundamental level. Have you ever read a book called Sapiens?
Yes, I've heard about it, and I've read like a couple of pages, but not much.
I was the same, yeah. I read about half of it, and then for some reason it just drifted off. But if anyone hasn't listened to or read Sapiens, it is quite a long book, but you can see summaries for it. Basically, the idea is, our ancestors had a wildly different diet to how we do now, and largely down to a population increase. When it comes to farming these foods in our ancestral times, when we're in a tribe, it's easier for us to go out hunt organic foods because everything's organic around you, for example. When it comes to population is now increasing, how do we meet the demands of this population? We now need to find efficient ways at producing food on a large scale. Since the agricultural revolution became a major thing, such as farms were becoming widespread, population also started to increase dramatically at the same time, but food quality went down. Because as you become more efficient at farming food, you cut corners, you cut costs, and before you know it, you add certain things to it to obviously help with the satiation and taste of the food. And also, if we're looking at that side of things, nutrients in the soil that are actually utilized by the food in the first place, you start to lose some of those nutrients in the soil. If you farm land and don't replace that land with nutrients in the soil, you eventually lose nutrients in the soil and you lose nutrients in the food too. So you could have a organic apple from land that hasn't been heavily farmed, and you can have an apple from a land that is heavily farmed and it isn't organic, and there's a wildly different nutrient density of the two, which is why they say organic's better for you. But organic is not always the easiest option to fill the needs of the population, because there's so many of us in this world.
You know what I find really interesting on that topic of organic, though? So we're talking about people who would be able to live longer. And these are, have you ever heard of blue zones before?
I've heard of blue balls.
Not the same thing. So blue zones are an area of the world where people have an above average life expectancy. And in these places, you find that people are mainly consuming whole foods. There isn't the availability of Western world where we have all the processed and ultra processed food available to us. They're consuming diets full of nuts, fresh fish, fresh chicken, and they've got people well up into their 90s going up to the mountains, for example, in Peru. They'll go up into the mountains and continue goat herding up until their 90s. Doesn't that say something in my opinion, in like my opinion, for health, that these kind of places that are financially deficient are still managing to make the correct choices, yet in a world where we are almost governed by money, that we're still making the wrong options when we're choosing food. That's why I came in with the lazy comment earlier, because I'm like, we have those options out there to do these things, to find this food, but it is the essence of convenience that we go into the ultra processed and processed side of things, because in these blue zones, you know, they have the selection, they grow their own stuff, or they get it from local people.
Yeah. Do you know?
Go on.
Apologies for interrupting the podcast. We know you're getting fully engrossed into this episode, and we really appreciate you stopping on the video on YouTube or on Spotify if you found us through one of the search pages. Make sure to leave a review and a subscription if you haven't already. But we just wanted to interject a point here that me and Nick have 15 years of coaching experience between us, and it's only getting better as we've got better guests on the podcast. The only way we can do that, though, is with the growth of our program that we've just released. We've got a 12-month Perform Well program, which has just dropped, and we'd love you guys to get involved in it. If you want to know more details, make sure to head to the description, as we've got our website in there, which can give you a full overlay of the program. We're looking to help career-driven professionals, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and anyone dominate their life by improving their lifestyle. Me and Nick like to claim ourselves as experts in this area, and if you want to check out some of our other transformations, I'm sure you do. We've got some amazing people who have performed so well off the back of this program. Have a cracking day, and we really appreciate your time. Let's get back to the podcast.
I was going to say, so do you know also that's interesting about processed food as well, is that you can have a homemade burger. Let's say you get beef mince, right? So beef mince is already processed. Let's just say it is literally just beef mince. You've churned up some steak into beef mince. There's nothing added to it. It is technically processed. So people get this idea that processed foods is bad when actually it is just being processed from what it was before. And that's not a bad thing. Your body processes it. You eat a steak, your body processes it and digests it and absorbs it. The problem with ultra processed foods is what people mostly refer to it as, is that it's not just ground down from steak into beef mince. They then add preservatives into it to make it last longer. They add flavor enhancers. They add e-colors, for example, to make it look a certain way, because I don't know if you've ever seen a chicken breast when it hasn't had the e-color in it, but it looks fucking awful, mate, all right? And so that's what we're looking at when we talk about ultra processed foods. Is it's not just processed down to a basic level, it's added stuff into it, and that has been shown to be the main cause of the issue. This stat might be wrong, but I heard in the grapevine from the RFK junior guy himself that there's over 1,000 chemicals added to food in the US, which are illegal in Europe and UK. I could be wrong with that stat, and if I am, if anyone's listening, you're welcome to fact check me on that one. But we all know the US has a higher rate of obesity than everywhere else in the world, and we all know that they have stupidly ultra processed foods over there. We've all seen it, you know, king size everything. You know, I haven't been there yet. I want to go there. Have you been there?
I've never been there. No.
I want to go there and I want to eat all their food. Don't get me wrong, but I know it won't be good for me. So he mentioned that there's over 1,000 chemicals in food that are currently illegal anywhere in the EU and the UK. So we have better food laws over here. And he reckons by being in power, he can fix this problem and remove some of these chemicals. So yeah, main point I'm trying to make is ultra processed foods, things added in, as opposed to just processing food down.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think that the interesting topic place is America. Again, America, seen as a very affluent society. You know, they've seen like they're one of the biggest powers in the world, and still, even with this financial, positive side of the financial situation they have, they're still turning around and they have the highest obesity rates, because I don't think care and consideration has been ever taken into the regulations around the food. I argue that the UK has better UK food regulations for sure, considering, as you said there, I know the stat may not be correct, but I understand where you're coming from with it, that there may be a lot of different ingredients that are used over there. I think one of them was an oil-based substance. I can't remember what it is, There's a certain oil that's used in America. I can't remember the exact one. Again, if you guys know, then drop it in the
High
comments.
fructose corn syrup.
That's the one. It's illegal pretty much everywhere in the world, but in America, they use it in most of their products. Like, you will go to Costco, and most of the products you pick up will have that in, because it increases it's like a flavor enhancer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Go on.
Sorry, I thought you finished then. I was just going to say, actually, what's interesting as well is back in the 70s, 60s, when they had the big debate about removing high-fat food from our diet, as they lowered fat content in foods, they actually then had to increase the flavor of it by adding things in like high fructose corn syrup. So they made an association with low fat as in low calorie. They realized that calories were causing people to gain weight. So they lowered calories by lowering fat, but then they replaced it with other things to make it taste better. And this is when we had a large influx of chemicals added to food and additives and all that stuff, and including obviously natural flavorings, natural sweeteners. Interesting point.
Well, here's a question then. Yeah. On the topic of flavor enhancers, people love like a no sugar like vanilla syrup, don't they? A lot of people who have it in their coffees will have like sugar-free vanilla syrup. But actually,
nah, man. Nah, that's bad. That's awful.
In the context of it, though, if we're thinking about flavor enhancers, these are sugar-free. So they don't contain sugar, which is demonized. Sugar's bad, you know, but they don't contain sugar. However, these flavor enhancers are basically just chemically produced to, as you say, they're like high fructose corn syrup, to make something taste better. But we've taken out one of the things that we associate with really poor health, which is sugar. Now, which one of those, if somebody said to you, okay, well, I want to consume a couple of tablespoons of sugar in my, like, in cane sugar or whatever, put that in my coffee, or the sugar-free option, what do you think's actually healthier out of those two?
Do you know what? It's interesting, man. That is interesting because, you know, I can, my instinct, my natural instincts when I hear sweetener is it's bad for you. And when I hear sugar, I also hear it's bad for you. But if I was to compare the two, I would imagine sugar is better, which actually doesn't make sense. Because sugar has had a link between a lot of issues like obesity, heart disease, etc. if you have too much of it. And sweeteners hasn't had that link yet necessarily. And the FDA, obviously, that's the American Federation, I believe. I'm not sure which one's ours. Which one's the UK?
Ours is WHO, isn't it? No, it's the World Health Organization.
No one trusts them. Anyway, so let's just say, obviously, if there's a cancer link or a carcinogenic link or some other link to a chemical like a sweetener, for example, we would have known about it by now. You know, because it's widely put in a lot of our foods, and there are chemicals that aren't as researched and as, you know, haven't got robust studies and research behind them to actually show that it's does something to our bodies. So we just need to be clear about what is good through steady, you know, robust research in the long run. That's the best way to go about it. But obviously, I'm not saying sugar is bad for you, because there's a lot of reasons why sugar might be bad in a lot of situations. If your diet is full of shit, then I bet 9 times out of 10 you eat a lot of sugar as well, which means that the rest of your diet's causing a problem. Whereas if you're eating good shit most of the time and you have a little bit of sugar, you're probably fine. You know what I mean? I think it's the cause and the effect, isn't it? It's cause and effect. What's actually causing the effect? And is it sugar? No, it's probably the rest of your diet. Most of the people that eat high sugar diets are probably eating a lot of shit food. They're probably not going to the gym. You've got to make that link.
Yeah, they're not looking at things. And it's good you said that, because I think for simplicity's sake, for a lot of people who watch this as well, that we always say, we've preached it in the last 3 episodes now, 8% of your diet whole foods, 20% of your diet you can have ultra processed foods in it. But if we are then starting to see more of a linkage between, you know, health issues, and actually we spoke on the podcast before here about some research, and again, correlation, causation. You know, correlation doesn't always mean causation, but links between ultra processed foods and the increased autism rates. Again, not saying they're true, but it is, you know, there are some statistics out there. I'd have to do the classic randomized control trials to actually see if this was true or not. But there are studies coming out that are saying there is, you know, an increased number of autism over the last, 5 years. I think, what did you say? It's 1 in 36 people now have autism.
It's interesting, actually. Let me just get it up right here. So these are based on the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States. In the year 2000, 1 in 150 children had autism. And then since 2000, now it's 2020, it's now 1 in 36 children. So about, what's that, 5 times?
Yeah.
But there is this argument, obviously, that we identified that potentially it's because of increased awareness of being able to identify who has autism in the first place.
Yeah.
And that can increase numbers just because you're able to detect it better. You know,
Well, it's like ADHD as well. Like, those people have been diagnosed with ADHD these days.
yeah.
So we can't really correlate that to dietary stuff. Heart disease, I think we can have more of a tighter link to it. And as you're saying, America are a forefront of having the highest rate of heart disease in the world. I think shortly behind like Beijing and China. I think they're the 2 places that have most highest rate of heart disease.
That's
which is
crazy.
absolutely insane, isn't it? When you think of these countries being some of the wealthiest in the world.
And you know what's interesting as well with that is that normally the best link or the best correlation for heart disease is obesity as well. So as obesity rises, heart disease rise. And it's not always a case of heart disease is caused by diet. It could be the fact that you're obese. So even if you ate processed foods, but you decrease your calorie intake and lost weight, you might actually see a reduction in heart disease as well.
So there's all of these factors that come into play. And to summarize for you guys as well, that you've got to do the best you can in your own situation at the end of the day. Just to give you some practical advice, to have a little cupboard review. See what's in your cupboard right now. Clock in and write down, like do a little tally of ultra processed versus whole, and see if you have more whole foods. Again, processed can be in the middle ground because you can chop an onion and it's suddenly processed. So just do a little cupboard review. Have a look what you've got. And try and look if you've got about 80% of whole food sitting in your cupboard right now. And if, go on.
What is a whole food, Dan?
A whole food is stuff like, for example, if you buy a sweet potato raw from the supermarket, a potato raw from the supermarket, and then you put it into, I don't know, you boil it up, you oven cook it. They're your whole foods. They're the kind of things where you just imagine grabbing something and it is as raw can be. Yeah, it's been sprayed with pesticides, etc., etc. We're not going into that, but that's as raw as it can be. That is a whole food.
So that's how you determine in your kitchen what is whole, what is processed and what's not. Anything with more than one ingredient is technically processed. However, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad for you. That's what we're trying to say. But the more ingredients that it has in that food item, obviously, the more processed it's going to be. That's sort of where you want to get that list from.
I agree. Well, guys, we appreciate you watching today. It's been a cracking episode, and please leave your thoughts and debate with us in the comments as well. We really appreciate. We are only 9 subscribers away from 100 subs, so if you can, please leave a little sub on here. We appreciate everyone watching and listening at this point in time, and we appreciate the loyal listeners and watchers. Make sure to like and follow, and get on over and give us a little 5-star review on Spotify, because they do us wonders in terms of getting the podcast out to more people, and you really help us out, and we appreciate you guys. So have a cracking rest of your day, and we'll catch you later.